Welcome back to the Other Side of 45's podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational family trauma and curses, completing my 50/50s by 50 list, and my life as a single empty nester. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. This episode, I'm going to talk about the progression of my parenting. Um, I'm in the stage of parenting I describe as support and guide. I don't make decisions for my adult children. It should go without saying that, of course, I started out making all of their decisions for them because they were babies. But I'm going to go just a little bit deeper on how I got to be or what type of parenting style I had when my children were growing up. So I wanted to be the type of parent that I wanted when I was growing up. Many of us grew up with parents who parent us the way they were parented. No shade to how mother and grandmother were raised, but I wanted to do things differently, and I did. I'm not going to cover discipline in this episode. This is just regular parenting, minus the discipline, if you can do it that way. I'm pretty sure I've covered this story of how my youngest daughter changed how we ate dinner, but I'll go over it again. She was the preschool age. I had worked that day, picked the girls up from daycare. I made dinner, sat the girls down at the table, and I was going on to what I call next mode, meaning whatever is next for the night, what be it getting clothes ready, whatever. I was ready to do that. That was the routine. But on this day, my sweet baby said to me, "Mommy, sit down." And she tapped her little hand on the table, you know, as an invitation for me to eat with them. And that changed my life. Not only did I sit down and eat with my children, I decided that's how we were going to have dinner each day. Now, this may sound like a no brainer, but that's not how I grew up. We didn't eat together as a family. I remember before mother married my stepfather, she worked second shift. She married him when we were 8 years old, so we were very young. When what I'm about to say occurred, so we would come home from school. My siblings and I had to eat dinner early because, like I said, mother worked second shift and she wanted us to eat before she left. My teenage aunt, my mother's sister, babysat us while mother worked. So we would come home from school shortly thereafter. We were at the table eating the dinner mother made for us. And while we ate, she busied herself with the things that need to be done. The what's next mode. And that's how I grew up. And that's what I was doing when my girls were little, when my daughter stopped me that day. I was doing the exact same thing until she stopped me that day. The point of sharing this story isn't that we broke the family curse, even though we did, of not the broke the curse of not eating together as a family. We did, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that my parenting style involved listening to my children. And again, being the type of parent I would have wanted growing up. Now, I'm not saying I was upset with the way we had dinner. I knew nothing different. So it wasn't, when I was that young. I did see it on television, but I also thought that was just on TV. But the point of this is showing that my progression with the girls started when they were quite young. There were things that I set out in my mind to do differently when they were babies. And then there were things as they started getting older and could start talking and have a little input that I changed based on what they said, as in the incident, as in the situation that I described earlier. So, growing as a person who had little to no say in how I was raised, it was so important to me to give my children a voice on how they were being raised. In my parenting, one thing that I did do was admit when I was wrong. Now, we're not talking about a simple, "Oh, dang it, I forgot to turn the stove off," or "I should have made a left instead of a right." Not like that. Not obvious, "Oh, dog, I made a mistake." We're talking about situations where I may not have made the best decision. And so then I would say to my kids, "You know what? I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said or done that." But I'm going to illustrate to you how I shared this with someone else. As you may or may not know, I work for a major retailer. I'm not particularly thrilled about where I am, but I'm in school and that should change soon. So, working in retail gives me access to young people. When I say young people, I'm referring to, 16 to 23, 22 years old. 23, 22 years old. Um, and at work, they do refer to me as Miss and they use my actual government name. They often come to me for advice because they're about my children's age and they know that my kids are in college. One young lady who was in her senior year of college, and she had a child while she was in college. So she's a bit older than a typical college student. So if you graduate around 22, 22, she's a bit older than that because she took time out to have her son. But anyway, we were just talking like we had usually do, and I had told her some story, I don't remember, about when the girls were young. And in the story, I said, "Oh, and I apologize to the girls." And she said, "You apologize to your daughters?" And I was like, yeah, I was wrong and I needed them to know that sometimes mothers are wrong. This and she was so surprised and a little impressed. And she asked me about my parenting. Now she too is a mother, woman of color, and her mother also a woman of color. And she said her mother had never apologized. And she thought it was very admirable that I would do that for my girls. And I told her, I said, be the type of parent that you would want while you're raising your children. I said, put yourselves in that child's position and say, what would I want from my parent? And she was like, sometimes she expressed to me that sometimes she is a little apprehensive about changing how she parents, excuse me, because of the way she was parented. And sometimes parents, regardless of race, expect you to raise your children the way they raised you. They expect you to continue those quote unquote family values, even if you no longer believe in those. So I get it. I dealt with that, and in some ways still am. But you have to have the strength and the courage to say, I know more. I want better. I want different. Not necessarily better. I want different. But in the case of my children, the older they got, the more I encouraged them to make their own decisions. I wanted them to take charge of their life because, as you know, coming out of the cold, I didn't have those options. There was no make your own decision. There was no take charge of your life. So not only was I going against my family, I was going against the cold. So all of this was absolutely new for me. But I knew I wanted something better and different for my girls. And that's partly how and why they were able to get in so many different activities. I started them at the preschool level when they couldn't make any decisions, and I introduced them to gymnastics, and they loved it. And I wish to goodness that they could have continued, but the schedule just didn't work out. Just so you know, the rec center, I think it was through the city county. It was through the city. Were offering these gymnastic classes at a great rate, but to sign them up permanently would be for their age group because they were so young was during the day. So it was more catered to stay at home moms, which I was not. So I couldn't get my babies in gymnastics. They couldn't stay. But that was okay because as they got older, they were able to explore other activities like dance and cheer. And they were the one in soccer, and they were the ones who were able to make those decisions, say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, and let's continue. And I love partnering with them to decide what activities they would be in, foods they would like. Just, I mean, there were lots of other things. There's so many things that the girls and I just sat and made decisions together. And then there were times where they made decisions on their own. Like, for instance, my youngest, when she was in middle school, and she just came home one day and she told me she did not, she was going to, she was going natural. When I say natural, I mean no chemicals or heat in her hair. Now, if you're a person of color, you know what a big decision this is for a young girl. And not just now, but this was during a time when you're wearing your hair natural was not on trend. Like there was no social media, there was no push, there was no natural hair movement at that time, but she made that decision. Shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, her sister joined her. I didn't join until 2018. Now, when the girls were growing up, I knew I did not want their hair chemically processed all the time. My girls don't even understand what it was like to have your hair relaxed every 4 to 6 weeks. They went like 3 or 4 months between touch ups for relaxers. So they don't even understand some of the things in the videos that they see on TikTok about what it means to grow up in a Black household because I didn't do things that way. They can relate to some, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, they're like, I don't know what they're talking about, but they get it. So when she came home and said that she didn't want her hair relaxed, it was a no brainer for me. Okay, your hair, your decision. I don't even think that decision would even popped in my head because I don't know, it wasn't normal for me to buck the system. Not too much later. Side note, having two children, both being raised by me alone, sometimes I am baffled by how different they are. It's just baffling to me. I say all the time they're the best parts of me, my left and right brain. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Recently at work, a young lady approached me. She has now just completed her freshman year in college, and she struggled. And I was able to share with her some of the things that my girls did because they also struggled in the same areas that she did. But she came to me about this particular situation that she was uncomfortable with. And she was uncomfortable because she was invited to a party where she only knew the person that invited her, and it was a sleepover at a lake with males that she did not know. She felt very uncomfortable. So she point blank asked me, would you let your girls go? Now, at first I said no. Then I stopped. I said, actually, I don't make decisions for my girls. I advise, I don't decide. Then I said to her, I think you already know what you should do. She looked at me and she was like, yeah, I do. And that's where I am, guys. I try to help my girls come to their own conclusions. Sometimes they honestly just want me to make the decision for them, but I refuse. They're adults. They need to learn how to weigh their options. They need to listen to their gut and do whatever they need to do to make informed decisions. And I encourage them to do that. I'm glad that we have an open relationship even now, that they can come to me and that they feel comfortable coming to me. I love that. I love that we're able to dissect whatever problem that they have and then they'll make the decision on their own. Recently, my oldest daughter said to me that she was in an Uber and for some reason they were talking about me. And he asked her, he said, I know why. His mother also came out of the same cult, and he asked my daughter, he said, is your mother happy? And she answered yes. And then she came home and she said, Mommy, are you happy? And I just looked and I was like, yeah, I guess I am happy. And she said, I thought so. I said, why does it not seem like I'm happy? And she said, yeah, you do seem happy. And then she told me about the Uber driver, and it made me feel so good because of through all of this, I am exactly where I should be, happy. And it just, like the theme song of my life, Just Fine, by Sister Mary J. Blige. See, I like what I see when I'm looking at me when I'm walking past the mirror. Don't stress through the night at a time of my life. Ain't worried about if you feel it. Got my head on straight. I got my vibe right. Ain't gonna let you kill it. You see, I wouldn't change my life. My life's just fine. Meet me on the other side of 45's podcast website and Instagram. New episodes will be released every Monday. Thank you for tuning in. Please rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so others can find it. It helps me grow my podcast. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated. But before I end, I do want to tell you that I got something special coming up. Beginning Memorial Day weekend, I'm going to be doing episodes with my children and other Gen Zs. It's going to be a series called X versus Z, and we'll discuss different topics. Um, so I hope you like that. And you'll see that episode, like I said, on Memorial Day weekend. And till then, have a great day.